This land is mine. God gave this land to me.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Well, change of plan. I was going to lead with questions about Prince William's intervention into the Middle Eastern crisis, and then follow it up with some information I had received about concerns about Harry and Meghan's expenses at Invictus from veterans. But I have some really good news to share with you. Dan Wootton has been completely exonerated. All the investigations into his supposed and concocted by his enemies misconduct has been shown to be the lies and the vicious attempts to destroy him and his reputation, which they were. The police in both England and Scotland have found that he did nothing improper. As he put it to me, he has never once hacked a phone, or he has never done anything illegal. Of course, this was a witch hunt, which was fabricated by Byline Times, doubtless with the connivance of David Sherborne and Prince Harry and Meghan, that embarrassment to humanity, that shanker on the posterior of royalty and public life. I'll get to that in a minute. But I've made a few notes, and let me try to do this in terms of the notes that I made. The investigations were based in part upon the information of a fantasist by the name of Sarah Data. That is her, I suppose you can't say nom de plume, so I suppose you would say nom de website, who evidently was funded to the tune of £100,000 by the Sussex Squad. This is deeply troubling, that yet again Meghan and Harry and their cohorts and supporters have gone after a reputable journalist who was simply fulfilling his journalistic duties, which involve speaking the truth to the public and making sure the public receives the truth. How many reputable journalists who are going about their job in a fair-minded way are we going to witness being destroyed by Meghan Markle, that poser par excellence, and her brain-dead but for one 7-point-something inch brain cell which reposes not above his neck? Are we going to have to witness all of these shenanigans? Piers Morgan, constructively dismissed by ITV because Meghan Markle objected to the fact that he didn't believe any of the proven lies that she told to Oprah Winfrey. Sharon Osbourne in the United States of America. Career derailed, dismissed, because she denied that Piers Morgan was racist. When anybody with 2 eyes and 4 brain cells can figure out that the racist is Meghan Markle. She has entered our royal family and she has systematically used her every advantage. I'm so hot. I'm sure you know it. She has used her every advantage, her every wile, W-I-L-E, usually feminine wiles, or then, quite frankly, deeply dubious, moralistically wiles, to play the race card and to have the public forced to accept, as a result of the press being forced to accept, that this is a fine, upstanding woman, when it is obvious she's nothing but a refined and unacceptable phony who has created havoc and mischief, as indeed do all people with her propensities and personalities. Well, £100,000 paid to Sarah Data to fabricate information and come up with fantastical claims, all of which have now been proven to be untrue. That's the first thing. Then you've had Harry working with a convicted phone hacker and former jailbird criminal by the name of Dan Evans at Byline Times to destroy Dan Wootton's career, because make no mistake about it, the agenda was to destroy Dan Wootton's career, because like Piers Morgan, he saw through Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and what, in my opinion, is their sick, sordid and destructive games. I say that as a Jamaican to whom race relations matter very greatly, and they have done more to regress race relations in this country and in the Commonwealth than anybody else I can think of, except for Michael Manley, who only did it in Jamaica. You know, you then have this farcical, phony, concocted series of claims, which I have to tell you, I knew would amount to nothing. I actually said it previously on this program that they would amount to nothing, because I had checked with friends of mine in News Group, News International, whatever it's called nowadays, the Murdoch organization, which Dan Wootton worked for before he worked for GB News and the Daily Mail. And I received confirmation at the absolutely top level of that organization that they had found nothing against Dan. And it so happens that the friends of mine are people he worked for and with. and they were charitably disposed towards him, but they launched a thorough investigation and could turn up nothing. Now, since most of the accusations against Dan predated his time at, if not all, predated his time at both GB News and the Mail, obviously nothing was ever going to be, unless there was some aberration, which there has turned out not to be. Well, David Sherborne had better be careful. He needs to understand that a barrister has a duty to the court, and a barrister has a duty to the justice system that trumps any machinations that his clients can come up with to destroy freedom of the press in this country. Also, some of the informants should be prosecuted by the police, either for wasting police time or for lying. I mean, this is a situation that should continue to tick and tick and tick. And shades of Haman the Agagite, who's behind there, who prepared the noose for Mordecai and swung from it himself. I am looking forward to the day when that rope is around, figuratively speaking, obviously, the necks of David Sherborne. He's instructing parties such as Prince Harry and Meghan, and his colleagues like the convicted criminal Dan Evans, convicted for phone hacking, who's came up with all sorts of lies about Dan. I mean, or let me rephrase that, reported upon facts that he should have known were not facts and that were lies about Dan. Let's rephrase it for the sake of legal reasons. But it's not. What has happened is that Dan, first of all, was immediately stood down by the Daily Mail. Well, I think most people know my opinion of the Daily Mail. I mean, my posterior wouldn't condescend to be wiped by it. Let me put it that way. That's how low I think the Daily Mail often is. And their total lack of scruple and courage has been most regrettable, to put it mildly. They stood him down immediately. They didn't even wait. They didn't even give him a chance. They didn't even implement the cornerstone of our democratic society and our justice system. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. They stood him down immediately, threw him to the wolves. Well, I'm calling now for him to be reinstated. Fully reinstated. Then, to give GB News its due, it didn't stand him down immediately. No. It waited until Lawrence Fox used a word that the journalist, and in my opinion, gutter snipe, Eva Santini Evans, constantly uses. She's always talking, or always was talking, because I can only go off my investigations at that time because I never heard of her before and I don't have anything to do with her and don't want to either. Quite frankly, I don't want to be polluted by people like that. So the less I know about people like her, the better. But certainly at the time, it was pointed out to me in my researches that she was constantly saying she wouldn't want to shag this one, she wouldn't want to shag that one, and Lawrence Fox, you could say ill-advisedly, but he used her term and her expression and said that he wouldn't shag her. And if you recall, the whole issue turned on the rights of men and the rights of women. But this was what GB News used to get rid of Lawrence Fox and Dan Wootton. Now, I think many of you know that I often appear on GB News, and quite frankly, if the price of standing up for what is right means they never use me again, that's perfectly fine by me. Perfectly fine. I'm happy to pay the price. In fact, I would go further and say, if they decided that because I am recounting what happened and then calling for Dan Wootton's reinstatement, because people have been calling for it for months now, and I have refrained from addressing the issue because I didn't want to interfere with the smooth running of things insofar as the investigations were concerned. But GB News has to know, if it doesn't know already, it will know very shortly, that Dan Wootton has been completely exonerated and he did nothing wrong in that Lawrence Fox interview, according to him, because I asked him particularly at the time, did they say to you, because there's always an earpiece that the presenter has, did they tell you through the earpiece that you were to shut him up, or did they give you particular guidance as to disassociate yourself? And he told me at the time, he said, no, they only said that I was to provide balance. In fact, I understand why they said balance, but what they really should have said was context. But in the heat of the moment, I will give them the break. But they actually should have said context, because Lawrence Fox was doing something that people regarded as tasteless, and they didn't understand why he had done it. Shades of Jeremy Clarkson alluding to the scene in Game of Thrones with Meghan Markle. If you need to be careful when you are making an allusion that you actually include the situation to which you are alluding. Otherwise, it shoots over many people's heads and you can end up being cast in the wrong even though you are not. So let's give credit where it is due, that Lawrence Fox did not provide context by making the link to Eva Santini Lewis's many statements about which man she wouldn't shag. So his comment, tasteless though it was totally appropriate to the circumstances and far more tasteful than her comments, because why she would be constantly saying who she would and wouldn't shag, depending on her political beliefs and their political beliefs. I mean, excuse me. I mean, the study in vulgarity and obscenity. But let's give credit where it is due. So they said balance, and Dan said, if you cast your mind back to the interview, if you saw it, Dan then said that she was very attractive, which she is an attractive looking woman. Well, that's providing balance to the particular statement. And then he did his default smile, which he always does when he is a bit uncertain as to it's, his default position, which was clearly not smiling in approval. It was smiling in almost embarrassment. Let's get over this hump as quickly as possible. And he has been stood down because of that supposed offence. Well, I'm afraid, I personally do not think, in the context of the whole matter and the danger to freedom of speech, which is represented by Harry, Meghan, David Sherborne, and their backers, such as Hugh Grant of Hacked Off and Elton John, not to mention members of Parliament such as that idiot woman Caroline Noakes, Conservative. Well, let's see if she hangs on to her seat, because people like her are dangerous, and we have found ourselves involved in this country in attacks to our civil liberties from Meghan and Harry and those embarrassments, David Sherborne, Hugh Grant, Elton John, each of whom has had, shall we say, embarrassing moments. And I'm not going to go into David Sherborne's embarrassing moments. They've never been made public. But he has sympathy for people who, like Elton John and Hugh Grant, and of course the late Max Mosley. I'm sorry. Politicians and members of the court, officers of the court, as they are called in this country, should be protecting the rights and liberties of the citizens of this country. They should not be actively seeking to undermine them and destroy them. There are a few discomforting issues at play here. Considering that this whole complaint against Dan Wootton has now turned out to have been a vicious fabrication to destroy the excellent career of one of our good journalists in this country. And of course, GB News, which I have to say, I was always in favour of their basic tenet, which is freedom of speech. I hope that they are going to show their many supporters that they stand up for their presenters when it emerges that their presenters were being unfairly vilified and that their careers were in danger of being destroyed by malevolent forces, including lawyers, convicts, and deluded and malevolent public figures. I hope they are going to show the public who, because they, in their thousands, people have commented, and you can go back onto the comments in these videos and see people in their thousands have commented on how they were not going to continue to look at GB News, which was supposed to represent freedom of speech, if GB News didn't come right with Dan Wootton. And a lot of people said they were going to stop looking at GB News, and I was very careful to keep out of the debate, so to speak. I wasn't trying to influence people one way or the other. Well, now I'm going to try to influence people one way or the other, because I think GB News should forthwith reinstate Dan Wootton. First of all, he's much better than his replacement. And who doesn't like it can lump it, as far as I'm concerned. And if it means I'm never asked back on the show, fine by me. I survived without them very well, and I'll survive without them very well in the future. And also, my conscience isn't for sale, and certainly not for chicken feed. If I wasn't for sale for billions of dollars, I don't think I'm going to be for sale for chicken feed. Let's put it that way. And I would encourage everybody who supports Dan Wootton and thinks he should be reinstated to get in touch with GB News and say so. Okay? So, there will be more to come with this. This is just the initial, because so far I know stuff that no one else knows, and I also know stuff that I cannot impart at this juncture. But we are speaking about rectifying a grave injustice, and unless the Harrys and Meghans of this world are stopped in their tracks, they will continue to destroy the careers and lives of innocent people. You do understand that had the police not exonerated Dan, he could have ended up going to prison, despite being innocent, just so that Harry and Meghan can continue to pose as the absolute opposite of what they are as human beings. I'm sorry, I think that is truly horrendous. And anybody with any instinct for justice should be as outraged as I am. And now we will briefly address the next rather contentious issue as well, which I will cover in greater detail in Sunday's members only episode. And I'm doing that for particular reasons, because I cannot state certain things in a public video that would not cause difficulties for this channel. While in the members only video, I can be more forthcoming. So anyway, and maybe we should have a welcome break from two rather stupendous and fraught issues. with a very nice observation from someone called Lottie Mae Frank, which addresses an actually rather disturbing incident as well, but in the context of the destruction of people's careers and what's happening in the Middle East is comparably much less momentous, although it also strikes at the heart of decency and really what constitutes admirable behavior. Lottie Mae Frank says, and I thank her for this, for anyone wanting to refresh their memory of Lady C's video where she speaks of hearing from a lady who worked as Givenchy during Me Grain's dress fitting stroke making Princess Catherine cries stroke bullying Princess Charlotte. Look for the video released 2003-21. It really is well worth listening to. Thank you for that, Lottie Mae Frank. I suppose it shows the caliber of person that we're dealing with. And now I will go on to 3 comments about Prince William and his intervention. The first one is from Joanne McIlmoyle. Will you comment on Prince William's statement regarding Gaza? And Just Demands says, Lady C, I hope this isn't too controversial a question to ask. If it is, please don't answer it. There were several questions along these lines, so I just picked out 3 representative ones to cover the whole subject. What do you make of Prince William's unprecedented royal intervention into the Gaza conflict? He issued a statement saying he feels deeply concerned about its human cost and called for an end to the war. I know you have a Jewish descent on your mother's side, and on your father's, his uncle allied the Lebanese with Israel during the Lebanese Civil War. I suspect if anyone has an impartial viewpoint, it is you. May I observe at this point, I don't know impartial is quite the right word. Comprehensive might actually be a better word. But thank you for that. And Kathleen Marcus says, hi again, Lady C. What do you think about William wading into politics? His grandmother, the late Queen, never publicly aired her views as far as I know. I feel that the royals should stay neutral no matter how strongly they feel about an issue such as the conflict in the Middle East between Israelis and the Palestinians in Gaza. What say you? Well, I'm going to keep this very measured today. I will go into it in greater detail on Sunday. But sorry to those of you who are not members, but I do not intend to in any way, shape or form jeopardize our channel by falling foul of any YouTube guidance. Okay, so I believe in respecting boundaries when and where they exist. First of all, I don't think people realize royalty in a constitutional monarchy is supposed to be above party politics. A royal family actually occupies a political position. Therefore, they can't be above politics. They should be above party politics. They should be above partisanship within their own country. That's the first thing. So I understand where people are coming from when they think William should not have intervened. I personally back him up 100%. And I do it not only on the basis of, as far as the Orthodox Jews are concerned, I am a Jewess because my mother's mother's mother was born Jewish, and Judaism is a matrilineal thing. I know some people think you can convert, and according to the modernists you can. According to the purists, you can only be a Jew or Jewess if you are born of the womb of a Jewess. So, whether you are a liberal or an Orthodox, you could say, I am entitled to qualify as a Jewess. Of course, I'm not Jewish. I'm Roman Catholic. My great-grandmother converted to Christianity to marry my great-grandfather, since when none of us has been Jewish. And as those of you who know, I'm very proud of my Jewish heritage, as I ought to be. The Jews of Jamaica are the very first settlers of Jamaica who still survive from the early 1500s. Of course, we're going to take pride in our heritage. And all grand white Jamaicans have some Jewish blood. I can think of none that would have none. So you can't accuse any of us of being anti-Semitic because we're partly Semitic. On my father's side, you're absolutely right. My father's uncle Ignatius, who was the Archbishop of Beirut, allied the Maronites, although my father's part of the family was Greek Orthodox, being the subsidiary and collateral and secondary part of the family. The primary part of the family was and remains a Maronite. So we are from the collateral branch. But it doesn't alter the fact that Archbishop Ziadi in the mid-70s invited in Sherborne, and with an alliance between some of the Christians in Lebanon and hopefully trying to get all of Lebanon to be allied with Israel. And it resulted in disaster, including for members of my family. The Ziadi Palace is now a ruin, but we won't go there. This is all peripheral to the main issue. And the main issue is the British royal family is riven with relations who are part Jewish. The present Earl Mountbatten of Burma is part Jewish. In fact, he, rather like me, qualifies as Jewish according to the Orthodox religion. Now, if you will recall, the name of this royal house is Windsor, but the collaterals are Mountbatten Windsor, as a result of Prince Philip's mother being a Battenberg. She was never a Mountbatten, she was a Battenberg. The name was changed after she ceased being a Battenberg. But her brother, Lord Louis Mountbatten, Dicky as he was known to family and friends, he married Edwina Ashley, the daughter of Lord Mount Temple, and a Jewess. That's right. Her grandfather was a famous Jewish banker. Her mother was Jewish. So the present Lord Mountbatten of Burma is technically, according to the Orthodox Jews, as Jewish as I am. So that's one part of where the royal family is riven with Jewry. Many of their friends, a lot of the British aristocracy has Jewish blood. And the king and the late queen are very friendly with many of the Middle Eastern royals. For instance, I know as a fact that Queen Noor would privately go to things at Buckingham Palace with Prince Charles, as he then was, including attending Lady Fermoy's memorial concert. Privately, she was his guest. Of course, all of people like them and me, we all have a comprehensive view of what has gone on and the realities of the situation. And the reality of the situation is, and I'm now going to stick my neck out slightly and point out that many Israelis are of the opinion that Netanyahu is dangerous and that Netanyahu is embarked upon policies to save himself from prison because he faces legal problems if he is not in power, which people generally don't seem to realize, but the Israelis are fully aware of it, as are anybody who is sophisticated and well educated in terms of politics. And he has goals that, to be achievable, would end up actually causing a third world war. Does anybody want a conflagration? Does anybody want an increase in suffering? And there's also the fact, and this is a fact, that in 1948 the United Nations declared that there would be two states, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine. Where is the state of Palestine? And I know of no well-informed, well-educated, well-reasoned people who do not believe in and accept that the only possibility of a peaceable future, admittedly at first with difficulty, is a two-state solution. This Netanyahu doesn't want. A lot of Israelis want it, but Netanyahu doesn't want it. Of course he doesn't want it. The alternative is a prison cell. Emotions run high on all sides of the question. But when you're dealing with truly important things, you cannot allow your emotions to override your ultimate self-interest and the self-interest of both Israelis and Palestinians is to have a state of Israel and a state of Palestine. And when people say, oh, that's not going to work, well, my dear, I'm sorry. Just look at France and Germany. Look at the number of times they've been at war and look at them now. It works. It works. It works. When people are forced to rub along together and the mischief makers don't stand to profit from their conflict, it works. Just look, as I say, at France and Germany. Two natural enemies, cheek by jowl in friendship nowadays. And let's not forget as well that from AD 71 until 1948, actually AD 68, because it was the fall of the Temple of Jerusalem, not Masada, till 1948, the people who had been resident in the state of Israel as it was at that time, then went to the surrounding lands, which are now in part occupied by the descendants of, or ostensible descendants of their hosts, I'm trying to find a way of putting it. They are occupied because it is the people who gave host. I'm tripping up over my words, but I need to be very clear about it. The people who gave host to the Jews who were expelled under Titus in AD 68 are the ones who are now dislodged from their ancestral lands. I'm sorry, I don't care which way anybody cuts it, and I don't care who supports what. There is no way that anybody can truly believe that the Palestinian people should pay for the suffering of the Jews in the Holocaust. I'm very sorry. I do not see it. And I say that as somebody who would not be alive now had Hitler prevailed. And I'll make another point. A lot of this developing and developed situation has been Western guilt, that the Western societies have not paid the price of. The Palestinian people have paid the price of it. And also the Israelis. Because don't think the average, well-educated, well-informed, secular Israeli, and I'm excluding the Orthodox because the Orthodox are pro-Palestinian, ironically enough. So I'm excluding them. But the other Israelis, unless they are rabid ignoramuses or have some extreme passion that doesn't allow them to see that the only solution is a two-state solution, they want this to come to an end. You know, the Palestinians their lands have been occupied for 75 years. And the world has stood by and done little or nothing while they have suffered. And Prince William is absolutely right. This needs to be brought, certainly the trouble in Gaza needs to be brought to an end. And Netanyahu's justification that he is going to eradicate all Hamas. Well, I will point out what another former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, said. If he had been Palestinian, he would have fought. You can't really argue with that. And I don't want to say any more at this point because I want peace. I want peace. And are we to believe that a handful of hostages, which is the Netanyahu point of view, justifies the dislocation of 2 million people? Where is the proportionality? Netanyahu needs to be very careful that to avoid ending up in an Israeli prison for corruption, which is what he's trying to avoid, he doesn't end up in the dock of The Hague for crimes against humanity. And this is the reality of what's going on. And this is why Prince William was absolutely right to make the point he made. And, you know, I'm going to point out to you that I'm going to read out one or two to end this on a note where you will see that Prince William's intervention is supported to a large extent by all peace-loving people across the board. Israel's Elon Levy issued a reasonably diplomatic response, saying, Israelis, of course, want to see an end to the fighting as soon as possible, and that will be possible once the 134 hostages are released, and once the Hamas terror army threatening to repeat this October 7 atrocities is dismantled. So he's really calling for the complete annihilation of Hamas. And not only the 134 hostages. So that's the Israeli government, if you understand what's going on. It's their response. It sounds reasonable, but I'll continue what he says. We appreciate the Prince of Wales's call for Hamas to free the hostages. We also recall with gratitude his statement from October the 11th condemning Hamas's terror attacks and reaffirming Israel's right of self-defense against them. Well, he's completely ignoring the United Nations resolutions on war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide, and the fact that for 134 hostages, you do not dislocate over 2 million people. So, I make that point. And then the chief rabbi, Sir Ephraim Mirvis, says, since his visit to the region in 2018, the Prince of Wales has shown a deep concern for the well-being of all those affected by the conflict in the Middle East, and his words of compassion today, which I welcome, are yet further evidence of this. And now we have the American government, which is quote-unquote hesitant about what is happening. Even the American government understands that Netanyahu is a rabid dog in a sheep pen. More than that, I'm not going to say today. I will go into it in greater detail on Sunday. The whole thing is extremely distressing and disturbing. And Prince William is absolutely right to have opened up his mouth. You know, you cannot look at the greatest ongoing atrocity committed against a people for the last 3/4 of a century and remain silent, and then say, oh, actually, it would have been impolitic to say anything else. The Pope Pius XII has been roundly and unfairly criticised for his Christmas address in 1942, when he only hinted at the atrocities which were being committed against the Jews and other people, an equal number of other people, incidentally, which seems to have escaped the attention of most people. He had constraints that he had to factor into his Christmas address to not only alert people, but also to not antagonize the occupying armies. More than that, I will not say at this point. I think William has done the absolutely right thing, and I say this as one of the founding members of a former organization called the Organization for a Just Peace in the Middle East, which amounted to nothing. This was in the 80s. Because there was not the will of people who should have been supporting the cause to support the cause. There can be no peace in this world until there is peace in the Middle East. The world will remain insecure until the Palestinians and the Israelis both have viable states whose existence is protected internationally, and they will remain protected. And of course, there are all sorts of flaky organizations on both sides of the divide which do their utmost to scupper the only solution that is viable and that is in the world's interest, and that is in the interest of both the Israelis and the Palestinians. Well, today has been a fairly heavy-hitting day, and I'm not sure I shouldn't have divided this into 2 separate episodes. And if I get any negative feedback, I will divide it into 2 separate episodes. But in the meantime, I will say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you and it hasn't been too heavy-hitting and upsetting. And to those of you who have differing opinions, I respect your right to have them. These are my opinions, and I'm not going to be changing them. They are things I have thought through very carefully with a lifetime of behind-the-scenes knowledge and experience. And I think it's really important to end on what might strike people as an obvious note, but seems to have eluded people all over the world. This situation feeds anti-Semitism against the Jewish people. Now, actually, the Palestinians are also Semites, but we only need to look at what is going on with the protest marches to see that ordinary Jewish people all over the world who do not deserve to be tarred with the brush that Netanyahu has been so liberally sprinkling everywhere, will ultimately suffer far more than he will ever suffer, irrespective of whether he ends up behind bars in Israel or The Hague, or if he manages to perpetuate this situation long enough that he might actually think he's going to cover himself in glory. Well, his glory and his liberty, in my opinion, isn't worth the suffering that will be caused to Jews all over the world. And we, as a responsible society, need to be aware of the fact that we cannot allow our prejudices, one way or the other, to affect the standing and status of people all over the world, each of whom deserves to have his or her rights respected, recognized, and protected. I hope that makes my position clear. I am in favor of the full restitution of rights and respect of rights to all parties involved. Thanks. Thank you very much. God bless. Take care. And please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Thank you. Bye-bye. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, and press the notification bell? Godspeed. Bye-bye.